In November of 2015, Continental Divide Trail thru hiker Stephen Olshansky, trail name Otter, made the worst decision of his life when he decided to hike out from Cumbres Pass in Colorado with an impending snowstorm on the horizon. He made it about 12 miles and became stranded on the trail. He could not get back to the road because of how deep the snow was. He survived for well over a month in total agony, and eventually he died. That is the extremely short version of the story. The point of this video is not to tell that story because I already did that in a previous video. What I want to do right here, right now, is go over 5 mistakes that Otter made that ultimately led to his unfortunate death. I already made a full-length video telling his story in detail, so go watch that right now if you haven't already. The link is right here, also in the description. That video absolutely blew up. It's by far the most viewed video I've ever made, and I just think that there's so much that we can learn from Otter's story, so we're gonna go over that in this video. This list of mistakes is not exhaustive. There's definitely more things that I could have included, and so please leave a comment if you have any more mistakes that Otter made or any other takeaways and lessons that hikers need to know from this story. And the last thing I wanna say before I get into mistake number 1 is that it feels harsh, honestly, for me to sit here and essentially criticize the decisions that a man who died made. So, like, seriously, I'm really not trying to disrespect Otter here. I'm gonna try to do this in the most respectful way possible. Just keep in mind, you might recall from the previous video I made telling his story that in his journal, before he died, he was explicit that he made some bad decisions. He really regretted a lot of the things that he did that led to him being trapped out there in the first place. And so I think it's okay to analyze the situation because I think there's just so much that can be learned that's going to keep other people safe. I think we can do that in a way that's still respectful to him. That's my goal here, and I would ask that if you're going to add your input in the comments, please do so in a respectful manner as well. The first major mistake that Otter made is that he was not respecting the time of year that he was out hiking in. Now, you might recall that Otter was an extremely experienced hiker, extremely accomplished, one of the most accomplished thru hikers in history. He had already hiked the Continental Divide Trail 2 times, is my understanding, as well as multiple thru hikes on the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail. He was at an elite level of thru hiking, backpacking experience. I didn't know him, obviously, but just purely due to this level of experience alone, I'm almost 100% confident that he knew that mid to late November was a pretty dangerous time to be hiking through the mountains of southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And not only would he have known this due to his experience on the trail, but he had also spent a few days in Chama, New Mexico, right before he hiked out, prepping for the colder weather. He was trying out some new gear, and he was having conversations with the trail angel that he was staying with about the incoming snow. So he knew that it was a risk to be going out there doing what he was doing that time of year. Now, honestly, if anyone could have done it, it probably would have been him, given how much experience that he had. But clearly, he was still in over his head, and again, it feels harsh to be criticizing him given what happened here, but I really just think it's important that you respect the seasons, respect the time of year that you're hiking, respect the mountains that you're hiking in during that time of year. It's definitely possible that in November he could have hiked through there and been just fine, but it's also clearly possible that during that time of year you can get some really harsh, dangerous, deadly weather. One more time, in his own words, he rolled the dice going out there that time of year, and he lost. The second deadly mistake that Otter made was he was not deliberate about letting somebody else know what his plans were, where he was going to be, and when they needed to sound the alarms to come rescue him. Now, you might recall from my previous video telling his story, there was one person who knew where he was going to be. This person was a trail angel in Chama, New Mexico. And obviously, I don't know a lot or really much of anything about the dynamic between the trail angel and Otter, so I'm running off of some assumptions here. I'm assuming that the only reason this trail angel knew of Otter's plans was because Otter had been staying with the trail angel. If anybody knows that this is incorrect, like, please leave a comment and correct me, but it's not clear to me that Otter specifically told this trail angel what his plans were. I think the trail angel just happened to know given the circumstances, which leads me to conclude that Otter was not very careful about leaving his plans with somebody else and having essentially an emergency person somewhere out there in the world that was keeping close tabs on him and ready to sound the alarms if need be. And this is a super important lesson for everybody watching. Whether you're doing an extreme thru hike like the CDT, or if you're just going out for a short day hike for an hour or two, you should always let somebody know what your plans are, where you're starting, where you're ending, if you're bringing a car, where you're gonna leave your car, how long you're gonna be gone for, and a safety window for when your emergency contact, the person you're telling all of this stuff, should be getting concerned and be sounding the alarm and alerting the emergency personnel. It's impossible for me to say that if Otter had done this, that he would have been rescued. I mean, they did know the general area where he was due to the trail angel that he had been staying with, knowing some of this information, and they still didn't find him. But it never hurts. And honestly, if Otter hadn't just been staying with this trail angel, there's a good chance that nobody would have known where he was going, and what his plans were. The next fatal mistake that Otter made was letting his vast experience cloud his judgment. Now, that is a bit of an assumption. I don't know exactly what was going through his mind, but again, I think it's reasonable to conclude that he probably had a lot of confidence, as he should have. I mean, again, he was literally one of the most experienced thru hikers ever. And so it's really easy to see how someone with that level of experience could easily be overconfident and end up putting themselves in a situation that's dangerous, that they would have otherwise avoided if they didn't have as much confidence and as much experience. This was honestly one of the biggest takeaways for me from this story, because though I don't think that I personally would have ever hiked out in wintry conditions like that, because that honestly scares the crap out of me, I can definitely see how my high level of experience through hiking, albeit not at Otter's level, but still I've done thousands and thousands of miles of hiking over the years. Seriously, I could see myself doing something similar due to my level of experience. I know there's a lot of new hikers watching this channel. I know there's a lot of people that don't even hike watching this channel, but I also know that there's a lot of hikers that are extremely experienced watching this channel. There's a lot of people watching this channel that have way more experience than I do. And so just let this be a reminder to you guys, no matter how experienced you are, no matter how comfortable you feel backpacking and through hiking and just being in the backcountry, always keep that ego in check. Always remember that things can still go wrong, and just be alert. You don't have to be less confident. You don't have to be scared. You shouldn't be either one of those things. You just can't tune out any of the potential dangers simply because you feel so comfortable and so confident out there. The next potentially fatal mistake that Otter made, this is the one that I saw probably being talked about the most in the comments section, is that Otter had been using marijuana right before he hiked out from Cumbers Pass. I don't want this to turn into like a discussion of like whether or not marijuana is super evil devil's lettuce or it's the best thing since sliced bread. That's not the point of this mistake. I just think I would be remiss if I didn't include this in the video. He was on a mind-altering substance when he hiked out. Now, personally, I'm not convinced that he would have made a different decision had he not been using marijuana. I'm sure he had hiked through harsh terrain while he was high many, many times. And again, due to his level of experience through hiking, I'm just not convinced that he would have made a different decision if he was sober. There's definitely a chance that he would have. In fact, in his journal, he clearly regretted that he consumed so much marijuana right before he hiked out. I just think there's a pretty good chance that he would have still made that decision whether or not he was sober. But that does not mean that him getting high before he hiked out was a good decision. It obviously wasn't. You should obviously never make, I don't care what you want to do, but just, dude, do not make high stakes decisions when it comes to things in the backcountry when you are not sober minded. You could also argue that he didn't realize how high stakes of a decision it was at the time, but I would be, once again, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. He was high when he hiked out. He expressed in his journal very clearly that he wished that he had not been high when he made that decision. So there's clearly a lesson there. And the next big mistake that Otter made, in fact, this could be the biggest out of all of them and should be the biggest takeaway from this entire video. He was not carrying one of these. This right here is a GPS with an SOS button. One of these would have saved Otter. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but honestly, I think that if he had one of these, there's a damn good chance that he would have been rescued. I just bought one of these for the first time. I got it in the mail literally yesterday. I haven't used it yet, and I've never hiked with one of these before. And honestly, that was a mistake. I've always known that's a risk, but after making a lot of these videos over the past few months, and especially Otter's video, after telling all these stories on my channel, I had to get one. I should have known earlier, to be clear, but finally, honestly, Otter's story was the one that really finally pushed me over the edge. If he had one of these, he could have hit that SOS button. I don't know the details and the circumstances of how they would have rescued him, but he survived for well over a month. I highly doubt it would have taken a month for them to be able to rescue him, whether it was through a snowmobile, they could have possibly snowmobiled right into him, or a helicopter or something. They would have been able to get him out. Like seriously, all he would have had to do is have one of these on him, and I really think that he would have been saved. This one right here is the Garmin InReach Mini. Again, I just bought this, so I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys that this is the best one. I do know that this is a really popular one among thru hikers specifically, because it only weighs about 3.5 ounces from my understanding. They make a newer version, which is the Garmin InReach Mini 2. I honestly don't know what the difference is. This one was a little bit cheaper, so that's why I went with it. I'll have a link to this in the description. There's also other companies that make them. There's other versions of them. Some are cheaper than these ones. It really depends. You also have to buy a subscription service to it. Honestly, I think one of the biggest reasons why I never actually carried one of these until now was because I just didn't want to pay for it. But after hearing Otter's story, as well as other stories that I've covered on my channel, like Geraldine Largay's story, for instance, I think the price of this is well worth it, because it could literally be the difference between you dying out there or you being rescued. It's that simple. Like, that sounds dramatic, honestly, but the SOS button on this thing will work anywhere in the world. It's satellite. It does not depend on cell service. And I'll even go as far to say it doesn't even matter if you're through hiking. Even if you're just doing day hikes, easy, short day hikes, anytime you're gonna be in the backcountry and you're not 100% sure that you're gonna have cell service, you should be carrying some sort of GPS device. I really wish Otter had been. In fact, in one of the articles I read when I was researching his story, it seems as though he actually had one of these and had gotten rid of it at some point earlier in the hike. I'm not sure why. This should be an essential for anybody who's spending any amount of time hiking, whether it's for months on end like he was, or even if you're just going out for a few hours. Once again, there's a link to this device in the description. There's also other ones out there if you want to go do your own research and find one. Just please get something that has an SOS button on it, something that can connect via satellite to keep you safe. And of course, please keep Otter, his friends, and his family in your heart and in your thoughts.